Well, welcome to another episode of Beyond28. And man, I'm excited, man. This is a friend. This is a mentor. This is a beautiful person, man. Um, Reverend Earl Smith, and he's somebody that is like near and dear to my heart, near and dear to the Warriors and the San Francisco 49ers heart as their chaplain, and just an amazing person who always after when I see him, I'm not privy to being in these Bible studies that the Warriors get to do before the games. But when I see him, man, he always hands me the pamphlet for the Bible study, and I love him for that. He doesn't know this, but Reverend, man, I bring him on the road with me, man. Sometimes I just like leave him in my computer bag, and if I'm somewhere on the road, man, I'll take out the pamphlet and read it and do some Bible study. So, man, welcome to Beyond 28.
I appreciate it, Mark, and you need to know that I enjoy you, and man, I'm really proud of what you're doing, man. You have done some amazing things, and just your journey is fantastic, man. So I just want to commend you on your journey.
Well, thank you very much, man. It means more than you know. I guess my first question is because there's a lot to touch with you. For those who don't really quite understand it, explain what a chaplain is, and your role with the 49ers and the Warriors.
Well, I think for my role with the 49ers is a bit different than with the Warriors. With the 49ers, I responsible for doing the chapel services. I'm doing a team study. And when I say team study, I always try to reference that to say it may not be per se, like someone says, a Bible study. It may be a study. I try to get guys to tell me the themes that they're interested in talking about. Give me some themes, and I write them out, and I let guys vote on them. And depending on which one is voted with the highest number of votes, that's the one that we may talk about. And then I sort of go down a category. I travel with the team, a lot of one-on-one with the guys, lots of interaction with them, trying to assist their families. With the Warriors, it's a bit different because I go in and do a chapel service, and both teams are there, visiting as well as the home team. So the time I get to spend with the Warriors is actually time away from the arena more than anything else. It's meeting somebody for lunch or after a game, having a text message go back and forth, or just a call to follow up on some things that they may have heard at chapel. So those are a little bit different when they're on the road, is staying in touch with them, checking in to see how they're doing. So that it's basically two different type of things, both in a role of a pastor, but just different congregations.
So, Rev, I also wanted to ask you. You've also served as chaplain for San Quentin. Tell me about that and how meaningful that has been for you.
I think that if I had one thing that I could say that God has really blessed me to do, it would be that chaplaincy at the prison. It was a chaplaincy working with guys similar to myself. Uh, I remember when I got shot, uh, I heard the voice of God tell me I wasn't going to die. I was going to be a chaplain at San Quentin. And in '83, I was hired there as youngest person ever hired, and I didn't know what I was doing. I'm writing a paper for my seminary class right now for my doctorate, and I'm like thinking, they asked me a question. I said I didn't know what to do, but I thought because of my who I was, I could figure it out. And I had San Quentin really helped me to understand who God was, and the more I understood who He was, the more I came to know who I was. San Quentin was different because I was in charge of condemned row. They had no protocol for executions, and then I had to be involved in one, so I had to write the protocol for that. But more than that, I had to figure out how to get men to work together, how to get guys who were different ethnic groups, different religious affiliations. How can we get you to work together for a common good? And so I started the baseball team, and that was pretty cool. I love baseball, and we had the guys come from a lot of different groups to try out for the team, and that sort of split it. I've had some great opportunities to talk with people. I remember Geronimo Pratt was in there, and one day I'm in my office with Pastor Donald Green. I get a knock on the door, and it's Geronimo. I said, "What's going on?" He said, "This is Huey Newton. He needs you."
Hmm.
And so he brings Huey into my office. And if you remember, Geronimo had vowed that if he ever saw Huey again, he would kill him because Huey didn't allow any of the Panthers to speak on his behalf when he was sentenced. And yet, after all of that was said and done, when he finally saw him, he brought him to my office. So for me, I thought, okay, God, what a blessing that you have me in a place that I can be available to be a vessel to help in healing. So, and there were so many other stories like that that I was able to be a part of in San Quentin. So it was just an unbelievable opportunity. And I feel there was nothing like it, man.
Yeah, Reverend, take me back to your days in Stockton, because you could have very well ended up in San Quentin.
I did.
Yeah. I mean, in another way, with the direction that you were going, if you can, just take us back to some of your challenges and what you were involved with during your youth in Stockton, and how that ultimately changed. It's like the stuff in movies.
Well, yeah, in fact, they're doing Casey Affleck and Cheryl Bradford and Bedford and Chip Flannery. They're actually doing a movie on my book, Death Row Chaplain. But I believe when I grew up in Stockton, when I was growing up, I really felt like I had no connection with my mom. So I was angry about that. And if you understand anything, if you're angry as a kid, you can't strike out at the person that you want to because they're bigger than you. So I struck out at other people. I started harming people. I remember I found a knife on the ground and picked it up and stuck one of my friends. And so everybody called me crazy after that. And all the prophets in the neighborhood said that boy's going to end up in San Quentin. I fought all the time, sold drugs, gang member, and everything I did, I was trying to elevate my presence, trying to elevate who I was and my significance. I thought that would be a way to finally make people understand. For years, people didn't even know my name was Earl. Everyone called me Anthony because that's what my mother and my grandmother had told people my name was. But today, I need to have a caveat here. Today, my mom and I have a different relationship because I didn't understand what tools she had in her toolbox and what she was able to manage and deal with. And as a kid, sometimes you just don't know what people are having to deal with, and anger comes out. Older I've gotten, the more I can sort of see with clarity what was going on. For me, it was just violence after violence. I was 19 years old. Shot 6 times a contract because someone owed me money they couldn't pay. They figured I was going to kill them, so they tried to have someone kill me. And that was my life. And I remember going to the hospital and the doctor saying, "Tell the police who did it, you're going to die." And I remember laughing at him thinking, what do you mean tell? My life was built on the premise that the street reputation was more important than anything. Now, in between all of that, my father comes in and he asked the doctor, how bad was it? And the doctor said he's not going to make it. And I'm laying on this gurney. I'm burning up. I got 7 holes in me, 6 bullets. 1 went in, 1 came out and went back in somewhere else. Face all shot up, my neck, everything shot up. And my dad grabs this doctor and says, "You do what you do best. I'm going to go do what I do best." My dad left to pray. The doctor left because he figured I was dying. And this voice comes, and all of a sudden there's a calmness. No longer burning, no longer feeling anything. And the voice says, "You're not going to die. I have something for you to do." And I started laughing. The doctor came back thinking I was going into shock. I said, "If I tell you where the bullets are, will it help?" And the doctor looked at me. He says, no. I pointed at my nose. The bleeding stopped. I pointed at my neck. The bleeding stopped. Pointed at my face. The bleeding stopped. Pointed at my shoulder. And where I pointed, the bleeding stopped. The doctor didn't know what was going on. My dad walks back in and he grabs my hand. He says, son, you're a rebel, but you're God's rebel, and he's going to use you. He didn't know about that conversation, that brief conversation that I heard from God. And 3 days later, my dad took me home from the hospital, and he sat guard at my bedside because he was still worried about was someone going to try to come back and finish me before I could get healthy enough to go kill them. So that was my lifestyle. And I never felt like it was personal. I felt like the guy that shot me or a guy that had me shot it was business. It wasn't personal. And sometimes you grow up and the things you think are important are not really. I mean, I had drugs and money at that house, and not a single bullet was deflected by the drugs or the money. So that tells you how valuable that stuff was.
Yeah. How did your story help guys relate with you in San Quentin? I mean, I'm sure you talked to them about that, and you had to connect with them some way. So I'm guessing that story was part of your testimony to do that.
Well, I mean, at that point, there was like when I started, 23,000 people or 26,000 people in the prison system. And the people were sort of set in prisons by geographic area. So I knew people that were there. They knew me. And so that helped in terms of guys saying, well, that's such and such. And they tell you where I was from and go through the whole thing. In fact, my first December there, I was giving out Christmas cards, and I came across the guy that shot me. I'd seen him once when he shot me, once when we went to court. I didn't testify against him because I wanted him on the street so I could kill him. And now for the third, and he was on the tier with all the guys that I knew, my guys. And so even though I came and I was a pastor now, they still remembered who I was. And I remember this guy wrote the warden a letter and said, you got to get me out of this prison. The chaplain's going to have me killed. And they called me in for this investigation. And I looked at him and said, hey, the safest place that man will ever be is where he is. Because I told that guy something. I said, man, I need to thank you because God used you to get to me. Those guys in the prison, because they understood where I came from, they were pulling for me probably more than a lot of other people, because I could represent hope. I could represent the possibility of change, even if they were not going to be able to go home. Hey, one of my best friends, we both got shot the same night, different parts of town. I started in the ministry. He went back to selling dope. He killed a narcotics agent. He's still doing life without the possibility today in prison. But he ended up in San Quentin with me. Wow. So he got in the choir. He got in my singing group I started. And one of my best friends. And so if I knew people, I guess is what I'd say, Mark. I knew people, and people have a tendency to, in prison, they want to check you out. So they'll go through everything they can to find out who you are, besides what you say. But does anybody really know who you are?
Yeah. We're in the month of January, where we have the MLK Day. I would love the Warriors to host one of these at some point, right? But and I don't know if it's their fault more than NBA's fault, but what did Dr. Martin Luther King mean to you?
As I think of Dr. King, I think he represented hope, and yet he represented someone that spoke to the marginalized. He spoke to someone who perhaps had their dreams deferred by circumstances, situations. He spoke to people that were incarcerated, not so much in prisons, but incarcerated by economics, geographics, family. They're incarcerated by a lot of other things. And for me, he represents that voice that we still need to hear today. I in a couple days, I'm going to be in Des Moines, Iowa, speaking for Martin Luther King Day. And I'm going to be speaking at the same place he spoke at in 1959. And I was thinking he was in Des Moines, Iowa. Wow. And so I sent Harrison Barnes a text and say, man, I'm going back to your home state. so HB was like, wow. So I'm going to actually have him do an introduction for me and say hello to the people. But when I think of Dr. King, I think of somebody that was not afraid to speak. And he had a voice that resonated more from his heart than his words. And he had some powerful words.
Yeah. What do you think about what the NBA has done for years in celebrating his legacy, and what do you talk to the players about him? I'm sure his passing probably had I don't know if you remember that day, but had a significant impact on you.
Oh, sure. I remember the day they passed away. I was in elementary school, and I remember when they said that he was killed. I remember there was a lot of tears. There were a lot of upset people, and I was like trying to figure it out. My father knew him, and it was a very troubling thing to think that it's almost like instead of Moses being told by God, you're not going to go to the promised land, you're going to leave here and I'm going to pass this on to Joshua. He didn't have a chance to do that. His life was taken at a point when he had spoke about the promised land. He had spoke about a time, and I would listen to his speeches and go over and over, and I've listened to so many of them. So I think it was almost as if we were robbed at that point. I remember the riots, and I remember thinking, is that what Dr. King would do? Is this the response? And I was a kid, but I remember, is this what Dr. King would do right now? And I remember talking to Geronimo and Huey, and I asked them a question, Mark. I said, why didn't the Black Panther Party ever connect with the civil rights arm? I said there was a great opportunity to bridge and really do something special. And they said that we weren't where he was, and we never saw ourselves getting there. We had a different place we were heading. And they said we watched him, we looked, but they said we just couldn't do what he was doing. And I thought, with all of what they did, with the impact that they, as the Panther Party, had, they even said that they could not do what he did.
Yeah. Well, so many years later, why do you think King means so much to Black people, to the world?
I think King means so much to Black people because we've had a lot of people that raise their hands to say, I'm the next Black leader. But King never raised his hand to say, I'm the next Black leader. He just was the leader. And we find that there's a void. There's a void now where we're saying, if you look at the NBA, and they give out the MLK t-shirts in the stadiums and in the arenas, and the guys will wear them out for warm-ups, and they try to allow that to be a statement. But Dr. King's legacy is more than a day. Dr. King's legacy is much more than that one day a year. I remember thinking about Arizona and how long it took them to even embrace the legacy and even embrace the holiday. So when you see the players, I mean, we're going to be playing on Sunday. There's going to be a game on Monday on the day of his celebration in the NFL. Players are going to be playing basketball. There's going to be things going on, and it's going to be a brief. It's almost like a drive-by for King, and we'll get the drive-by. It'll get sprayed, and the vehicle just goes by. Is that really his message? No, his message is much grander It's much greater than that drive-by incident.
Yeah. You couple more questions. When you step in to speak to the players, whether it's the Warriors or the 49ers, what you get about 15 minutes, pretty much?
For the Niners, I get about 30. For the Warriors, I get about 20, 22.
Yeah. What message are you trying, like, what's kind of your game plan going into that, and what are you hoping they get from that moment?
I use it the same way I did with setting up messages in San Quentin. I know that they may not be able to be discipled per se because they're going from place to place, can't really be rooted in a church because of the season. So I try to make my messages in patterns so they're going forward. It's like now I'm teaching on the newness. I talk about a new thing, a new covenant, a new birth. And so, because this is the new year, so I try to make themes like that. And I try to do it in such a way that they ask me questions. And if I hear them saying anything, I try to see how I can bridge some of what I've heard them say or some of the questions they've asked me into the message to actually give them an answer, but also give them a handout with an answer so they can go back and review.
What what do you hope at Beyond 28? It certainly, you mentioned it, hopefully being deeper than Martin Luther King, just one day. Beyond 28 is more than 28 days. It's every day celebrating Black history. What message do you have about the importance of Black history and learning from it, and not you know basically learning from it so we could grow in the future?
Well, the message I would say, first of all, it must be something to be taught if there are so many states that are now saying don't teach it. If there are states that are saying that we're going to outlaw the message, we're going to outlaw the books that speak about it, we're going back to a time when we were basically being told what we could learn. And in order to really learn, we had to do it away from the school. We had to do it in communities. The whole oral tradition gets back to it. And I believe that it's a great opportunity, if we take it, for younger people to sit down with their elders and allow the elders to start to teach again. So I believe that it's a pivotal point right now for the elders to stand up and say, if they won't allow you to learn this in the schools, I need you to sit around the fire with me. If you think about the campfire, and I know we have to go, but if you think about the campfire, there's two campfire stories in the Bible that really hit us. The first campfire was when Peter sat around the fire while Jesus was in the court being condemned. He sat there and he denied him 3 times, but he was around the fire. The next campfire that's really significant is that fire when Jesus sets it on the shore and he puts fish on there and he has this meal for Peter and the guys that are fishing. So I believe that we need to start a campfire program again where the elders are saying, I've set this fire out for you. I want you to come sit around with me, and I want to tell you some things that I want you to pass on to your next generation. And so I think it's a great opportunity, if we'll take it, that if they say that they don't want to have it taught in the schools, great, let's go back to oral tradition. We have the books, we have the information, but let Mark Spears go sit down with a group of young people that want to be writers, that want to be on television, that want to be sports announcers, and sit down and tell them the history of who the first Black people were that did that and what they had to go through. Let Mark Spears say what I had to do to get to where I'm at right now, and some of the journeys and some of the struggles. And let the kids ask a Mark Spears a question, and you can go from place to place. And that's what I believe. So it's a great opportunity, in my opinion.
Well, Reverend, man, thank you. Thank you for everything. Love you.
Love you,
I hope
Mark.
you
Thank you,
enjoyed
man.
being on Beyond 28, man. We got to get you back every year.
I appreciate this, man. Thank you so much.
All right. Love you, brother.
See you soon.